Hello, everyone, and good morning or good afternoon, depending on where you're from. We're glad that you're here at today's webinar. If you have a moment, go ahead and put in the chat where you're coming in from today. We'd love to see where everyone's from. And yeah, glad that you're here today. So I see people are starting to come in here. I'll make that announcement again. So wanted to welcome everyone. Thank you. If you haven't already, go ahead and let us know where you're from. If you want to go ahead and put in the chat, we've got some people from Arkansas, Idaho, New Mexico. We've got Texas, Alabama. Good showing, a good showing across the state. Someone from Missouri, Orlando keeps coming in. People from the East Coast, got New Jersey, Ohio. Wonderful. Glad that you're all here. We have someone from Canada, Mississippi, Southern California. Yeah. Central California. Someone from Illinois. Yes, Liz is there. Well, we're glad we've got Maine. So we've got all the way from Maine to California. That's wonderful. And everywhere in between North Carolina, the Carolinas, Pennsylvania. So I wanted to welcome everyone to today's webinar. So as I said, good morning, good afternoon, depending on where you're tuning in from. I'm very excited today to share with you today's webinar, where we're going to talk about 4 AI-powered methods to help multilingual learners build their vocabulary. And my name is Dr. Ethan Lin. I'm a partnership consultant here with Reading Horizons. And this is a topic that's near and dear to my heart. Just to give a little reference, I wrote an ebook a few months back on this very topic. It covered 4 keys to unlocking multilingual vocabulary instruction. And it had different resources. And I decided, hey, AI is coming out. And I decided to make AI tools to match the ebook. And that sparked this webinar here. And so we're going to be walking through that ebook. If you don't have that ebook, you'll get that tomorrow in a follow-up email. But I've decided to make an AI component to each of the different keys to unlocking vocabulary. So I'd like to introduce myself. Like I said, my name's Ethan Lin. I have a family of four kids, so a family of 6. We live in Illinois. We live in central Illinois in a place called Peoria, Illinois, if you know where that is. I'll give a little background of how I got to be where I'm at. So to start, I got my teaching. I started at BYU at Brigham Young University in Utah. I had I majored in Latin American studies and minored in TESOL, teaching English to speakers of other languages. And I was looking to get some additional volunteer hours. And so I found an organization called Centro Hispano, where they taught English as a second language class to adults in the evening. And I went just to volunteer. And they said, hey, guess what? Our level 1 teacher isn't present, hasn't been for a while. You speak English and you speak Spanish, because Spanish is my second language. Can you be our teacher? Here's a manual. And I was pretty much just given a manual and said, go ahead and teach our low-level students. And that's how I started. I finished up my bachelor's, got a master's in TESOL, and then I moved over to the university scene. I went to Brigham Young University's intensive English program called the English Language Center, and I was essentially a curriculum director where I oversaw the reading curriculum, and I worked there for two years full-time. I was a curriculum director over reading. And then I decided, you know what, a master's degree is not enough. So I went to Northern Arizona University and got a doctorate in applied linguistics, where I studied reading and literacy from a linguistics perspective. And I still taught English classes, multilingual students. And so I picked up a lot of things along the way. And vocabulary is one of my major pieces here. And so that's what I wanted to share with you today. If you rewind about 4 years ago, I actually had a decision to make. There was a university in Oahu on the North Shore of Hawaii that I had some potential to be a professor there, or I could use Reading Horizons or go to Reading Horizons. I had worked at Reading Horizons before, I'd used their program before and saw great results in my classroom. And so I had a decision to make, and I decided to say no to Hawaii and say yes to Reading Horizons. And then it gets even better. I've moved my family from Arizona all the way to Illinois. So on days like this, when it's kind of wintry, it's like, oh, it'd be so nice to be in Hawaii. But I've enjoyed it. I've been working with Reading Horizons now for almost 4 years. Yeah, almost. And so I've really enjoyed it here. So that's a little bit about me. Let's kind of set the stage just a little bit for multilingual students, and then we'll jump into the main focus of the webinar. What I wanted to focus on here is kind of the growing population of our English learners. We're getting an influx. It's wonderful. This is the student population that I love, that I've worked with. It says here that English learners are the fastest growing subpopulation of students in public schools. And you can kind of see a national profile. Kind of some states have higher concentrations than others. My state here in Illinois is almost 13% of our public school students could be considered English learners or multilingual students. And it kind of depends on your state, but on average, as a whole, as a nation, about 10.5%. So about 1 in every 10 students is considered an English language learner across the nation. And here are just a couple of states. I know where people are tuning in from all over, and we welcome everyone from wherever you're tuning in. But here's some states here. You've got Texas, kind of a little profile here, some of the different languages and the percentage. So 21%. Got Spanish, almost 20% there at 19. Florida, around 12%. The different languages and the percentage. Spanish tends to be the predominant language that students are bringing. I actually had the opportunity to teach students from 45 different countries, Madagascar, Mongolia, all over the world. It's wonderful when they bring, their language, their first language as a wonderful asset there. So just kind of filling everyone in, just kind of setting the stage here. And then here's a quote from a book edited by Elsa Cardenas Hagen. If you haven't read this, if you're new to this, I highly recommend. This book is a very good jumping off point for getting into foundational literacy for multilingual students. And here's a quote that comes from the book. It says, fewer than 3% of teachers have the specialized certification to work with this group of students. And so I'm hoping today that this webinar can be something there, a drop in the bucket or something to help prepare us and to help us meet the needs of these students, to help them succeed, because they are a wonderful group of students, tons of potential, and trying to build up that proficiency, that teacher knowledge there. So what will we cover today in our webinar? There's going to be 4 methods. They correspond to 4 different keys that I've highlighted and identified in the ebook. So the first one is a bilingualized approach to teaching vocabulary. The next is morphological word families. Following that, we'll talk about collocations, and then we'll round it out with cognates. So there's 4 different methods there. What I'll do is I'll explain each method kind of from kind of the background of that method. And then I will show you, I've created a GPT for each of these methods, and I'll show you how it works and kind of some of the output that you could expect using this GPT. So as we're talking about vocabulary, I want to talk about the 4-part processing model here. This will set the stage. So this is the 4-part processing model for word recognition and vocabulary acquisition. And there are 4 processors in the brain that need to be activated as we are acquiring words, acquiring vocabulary. The first 2 go hand in hand. Those are the phonological and orthographic processors. So how is a word pronounced and how is a word spelled? And they need to be linked together. Think of through like phonics, or think of decoding and encoding. There, how is the orthographic and phonological components linked together? And then we also need to link meaning. So you say a word, you spell a word, you write it. What does that word mean? And then the final one is context. How is that word used in a broader context outside of isolation? So keep this in mind as we talk about the 4 methods. How are we activating each one of these processors? So I come from more of a linguistic second language acquisition world. We talk about form, meaning, and use. So the form here is phonological and orthographic processors. The meaning, obviously, is the meaning processor, and then use correlates to the context processor. So this aligns very well with second language acquisition as well. So let's jump into our first approach here, and this is the bilingualized approach. So not a typo, but bilingualized approach. And in order to understand this, I want to contrast or to show 3 different approaches to learning words. So the first one is going to be a monolingual approach, a bilingual approach, and then we'll ultimately end with our bilingualized approach. For this example, we've got our sample word is cat, and the language that we're coming from is Spanish. So we're going from Spanish to English. That is the L1 there. So what's the monolingual approach? Well, it's pretty basic. You provide a definition in English of the word. Now, there is something to note here. There are 2 kinds of definitions. There's a regular definition, and then there's a learner definition. So let's take a look at the regular, the dictionary definition here. So we've got the word cat. So what does cat mean? A small, domesticated carnivorous mammal with soft fur, a short snout, and retractable claws. Okay, I mean, technically that's right, but there's kind of a joke out there that you need a dictionary in order to read the dictionary. And so sometimes these dictionary entries are very difficult to understand and not the best for an applied classroom for students learning the language. And so what I recommend in a best practice is to use a simplified definition, which is referred to as a learner definition. So here's a learner example of of the word cat. So a small animal that is related to lions and tigers and that is often kept by people as a pet. So much more simple. You can compare there. So I always recommend if you're going to do a monolingual approach, you want that learner definition. These regular ones, they're written by lexicographers, people who write dictionaries. And I went to the TESOL International Convention last year in Tampa. I happened to eat lunch with a lexicographer. I've never met one. I don't know if you've ever met a lexicographer, but he was telling me of how lexicography as a profession, they're fewer and fewer, but he had this awesome British accent and it made him, he was intelligent, but everything he said was so elevated. It was one of the coolest lunches I've ever had. I got done and called my wife. I had the coolest call. I had the coolest lunch with this British lexicographer. It was so cool. Anyway, we'll leave these definitions for the lexicographers and we'll use the learner definitions for our classrooms and our students. Okay, so now we're going to look at the next approach, which is a bilingual approach. It's a very basic, you just translate. So we've got the word cat, the translation is gato. Okay, and something to be careful of is we're doing a bilingual approach. We need to be careful that we're translating the right meaning of the word. There can be more than one meaning of words, and English has multiple meanings of some words, so make sure we're doing the right translation there. Okay, so very basic, but remember, we're focusing on a bilingualized approach. And so what is a bilingualized approach? Well, you just take a monolingual and a bilingual and you bring them together, okay? And so you want to provide a definition in English, but make sure it's simplified, that learner definition. And then you want to provide that translation as well. So you're kind of merging both of those together. That's the bilingualized approach. And there's research to show this is effective. Sometimes people ask me, well, what about pictures? What about like total physical response, things like that? Yes, bring those in. If you have an image, if you want to show something to enhance, to solidify that connection, please do. I'm just highlighting some pieces here that come from research, and the research that I'm drawing from didn't bring pictures. They weren't studying that. But yes, if you want to bring some images, some additional pieces here to enhance the bilingualized approach, by all means, that is welcome, and bring that. Okay, so we're talking about the bilingualized approach for vocabulary. And as I mentioned, we'll talk about, we've covered kind of the background, kind of what it is. And now we'll dive into my GPT that I made. So if you're not familiar, there's artificial intelligence, these chat bots, you can think of very sophisticated chat bots. And ChatGPT is a very common one. It's the one that I use. And normally you can chat about anything, and it's pretty remarkable what that thing can come up with in little to no time. Now, it's kind of broad in general. So what I did is I created my own with a specific purpose. And I created one here that's specifically for bilingualized dictionary entries or output for your students that way. So that's kind of its sole purpose. And you can do regular ChatGPT for other things, but essentially you're going to get a link. Anybody on the internet clicks the link and you can just interact with it, and you just kind of type with it, and then it will give you some output. So I'll show you what that output looks like. So here's just a brief explanation. So this GPT helps teachers introduce vocabulary to multilingual students by providing easy English definitions and translations into the students' first languages. So you take a list of words that you are focused on, and then you tell ChatGPT, you say, here are the first languages of my students in the classroom. You press enter, you sit back, and then in a matter of seconds, you have some awesome output. And here's just an example, a small snapshot of what you can expect. So in this case, the target word was language. So I put in the word language, okay? And then I put in these languages: Spanish, Mandarin, Arabic, Chui, Thai, and Samoan. Okay, those are kind of a scenario. And I press enter. And then here is the definition it gave me: a system of words and grammar used by people to communicate. Okay, very simplified definition. And then here are the translations into the various first languages of our students. And it provides the actual script of the languages. If they use a whatever script they're using, a non-Roman alphabet, it provides that. And then it provides a little bit of like an English transcription as well of how to pronounce that. And so you can try pronouncing their words. It kind of makes it kind of fun there. So like I said, you can take big lists of words, put in all the first languages. It'll interact. It'll give you great output. You can download this as a Word, a PDF, whatever it is. So that way you can provide a bilingualized approach to introducing vocabulary to all of your students, even if you might not be a master at the Thai language or Arabic. You could allow the GPT AI to help you. So that was our first method, was the bilingualized approach. The next one we'll jump into is morphological word families. And to understand this, I'll show a little image. So here's an image here. This image comes from the ebook that we have. You have the word interest. We're going to call interest our head word. So interest is our head word. And then because it's a morphological word family, as you add different prefixes and suffixes, different morphemes to this word, you can expand this out. So you have another derived form such as interesting, so adding the ing suffix. You have interested, uninterested, interestingly, interests. So these are family members that are very much related with some slight morphological variation, but they can all come back, trace their, themselves back to this head word. So all of these derived forms are part of the same morphological word family that can trace itself back to this common head word here. And so the idea is that with learning a head word, and if you have some morphological awareness, some morphological knowledge, you can start applying this to different words, and your vocabulary will balloon. It will expand greatly. And so coupling morphological awareness into vocabulary acquisition can be a great way to build the students how many words they know and to expand rapidly. And so these are the morphological word families. And in your ebook, I've linked, there was some linguists, some great researchers out there that put together a wonderful website that you can create lists and all sorts of wonderful things with word families. I recommend it if you get the ebook. And then I've also made a more streamlined and simplified morphological word family generator here. And so I'll just I'll kind of read it, what this is. So the morphological word family generator, GPT, expands head words into structured word families, highlighting prefixes and suffixes. Designed for educators, it simplifies teaching morphology, vocabulary building, and word relationships. Yes, and then Michelle, sorry, I see something in the chat here. Michelle mentioned using the root word would work well with this visual. So yes, bringing in root words as well, roots, a great analogy, and that's why it was placed where it was. So thank you, Michelle, for adding that. So with this morphological word family, once again, same list you are working on with your bilingualized approach, or it could be a different list. You put in a list of words. Here are the words we're focusing on. Here are the words in whatever our in our classes, whatever they're exposed to. Here are some words that we're going to be targeting. Let's expand these. Let's bring the word families together. Let's build some word families. And here's what you could expect. So here's a snapshot. So the head word that I did was teach, very basic. Did the word teach. And then here is the output, the word family output. So you have teach, teaching, which is the ing ending, taught, the irregular past form. You have teacher, the er, the noun, er ending. You have teachable, teachability, reteach. And so you can see here, all of them contain the same head word or that same root, teach there, and then it highlights the different morphemes or the different affixes that could be associated with that word. And so maybe you could highlight, maybe we haven't really touched the able ending, or I see it's appearing twice. Or maybe we could just review. Remember, students, we've done the ing, so that way you can slowly build a critical mass of these morphemes, these affixes. And then as you are introduced to more words, you can just apply that critical mass that you already have, and it starts to snowball for students as they expand. So you'll have complete access to this, and it's a wonderful resource for you and building that vocabulary. All right, the next one, we're going to go to number three of four. This is collocations, and collocations might be maybe the most complex one, maybe the lesser known of all three of these. Like, what are collocations? And so I'm going to show a visual here. So, and I'm going to walk you through. So say our focus word is decision. This is the word that we are learning. Now, if you remember from the 4-part vocabulary processor, the context processor was a key part. So part of learning a word is using the word correctly in context. Now, words, they have neighbors. And so words co-occur or occur side by side with other words. If you're a native speaker of a language or a very high proficiency, sometimes these pairings seem natural and normal, and it's kind of like you don't even have to think about what word goes best with decision. Now, if you're learning another language, if you're learning English as an additional language, you might not understand some of these pairings because it's not necessarily intuitive. And so what we're trying to do is show students what words pair well together. And there are linguists, they're called corpus linguists. I came from corpus linguistics, where they run statistical tests to show which words are going to pair best and pair most often. I'll give two examples from when I learned Spanish. So if in English, I'm going to say, yes, I'm going to say make, in English, I'm going to say make a decision. But however, in Spanish, you would say take a decision. So as I was learning Spanish, I couldn't just say make a decision. I had to learn that their word is to take. And so if someone is learning English learning English from Spanish, they're going to have to learn it's not take a decision. It's I'm going to have to learn to make a decision. Another one, kind of a specific one is like in English, we say I dreamed about. So you could say like last night I dreamed about my family going on vacation. Now in Spanish, you don't say dream about, you would say dream with. Kind of sounds weird in English, but if I were translating over, I would need to know I dreamed with my family instead of about my family. I'll give a couple other examples here. We have the example here of, so we have heavy rain versus strong rain. You could say heavy traffic and strong traffic. Okay, you kind of hear the difference there. Not necessarily intuitive if you're learning English. We have rapid growth versus fast growth. How about at night versus in night? I like to go on walks at night, or I like to go for walks in night. Okay, you have to remember that at. So there's prepositions, all sorts of things going on there. And so these are what collocations are, is trying to pair words with their proper partners here. And so once again, I've created a GPT for this, the collocation builder. I love it. So generate and explore common word pairings with collocation finder GPT. Input a word and get organized collocations with examples. Perfect for educators. It helps teach vocabulary, fluency, and language patterns through keyword combinations. So here is what some output might look like. So I went ahead and I put in the word momentum. Reading Horizons, you know, it's we're reading momentum begins. Okay, it's kind of, that's why I chose that. So we've got the word momentum, and now my output. What adjectives go well with the word momentum? What verbs go with the word momentum? Okay, and so some of the adjectives might be considerable, great, irresistible. I'm like, I don't know about that one. Maybe I'd have to do some more digging, but considerable and great, yeah. And here's an example sentence. The movement gained considerable momentum. Okay, makes sense. Might not intuitively know that considerable and momentum go together. But this dictionary can help pull that out and make that explicit. Which verbs? There's a few verbs, but how about build up or increase? Those are verbs that go with momentum. So for example, momentum increased rapidly during the final stages. So once again, you've got this, you can work with this, you can give it a list of words, and then it'll give you, which adjectives, which prepositions, and it'll even include phrases, which phrases go together, or how is it used in a phrase, or maybe even an idiom. So you can start to really build out that context processor in a natural way there. Okay, that was number 3. We are rounding third heading for home. Method number 4 now is cognates. I like cognates. I consider them low-hanging fruit. And as a language learner, cognates were really nice because it didn't require as much brain power to remember and recall these words. So what is a cognate? So I tried to come up with a nice little definition. A word that comes from the same origin as a word from a different language. So let's take a look at this image. Okay, they're words that sound like and are spelled very similarly if they're using the same script between two languages. So you've got the word like family in English, and then in Spanish, familia. Okay, very nice. Okay, pretty simple connection there. Another example in English, if I'm doing the word group, well, what is it in Spanish? Grupo. Okay, look very similar, spelled, sound very similar. They come from the same root. Oftentimes they come from more Latin, sometimes Greek. They share similar roots. Not all the time, but oftentimes they do. However, you got to be careful. There are false friends. There are false cognates. There are some words that seem like, oh yeah, that's the same thing, right? But they're not. They look like they could be cognates. It's just a simple kind of, a piece of cake, but they have different meanings. And so in Spanish, there's the word embarazada, which means pregnant, which looks and sounds a lot like embarrassed. So you've got to be very careful. I've heard some funny anecdotes of somebody trying to say in Spanish as they're learning the language Spanish, hey, you embarrassed me, but they actually were saying you impregnated me. So you have to be very careful with some of these false cognates there. They're lurking. So they make for some fun stories as well. So with this, we have a cognate generator. And this is going to operate slightly differently from the other GPTs that I have created. So in this one, what you do is you put in your context. So a lot of times you'll see cognates translate a lot into the sciences and like mathematics and things like that. Not all, but that's kind of a heavy place. So you put in your context. Hey, I want to do biology, science, social studies. Let's try like a third grade level, a lower elementary, maybe a middle school, an academic level. And you can kind of put my students are kind of more like beginner, they're more intermediate and kind of intermediate high. You can kind of put your context, and then this will generate different cognates for your context that you have. So it'll help you generate cognates, compare English with any target language you want, and then it also identifies false cognates just to make sure you're not making any silly mistakes there or potentially embarrassing mistakes. So what does it look like? So I went ahead and put it, my prompt was, I just wanted it to give me just what are some basic Spanish English cognates, very basic, low level, introductory level cognates. And here is the output. So here are some real cognates. So we have in English, hospital, in Spanish, hospital. Man, really nice. I love learning these. They're low hanging fruit. You can easily acquire these. Actor, actor. Okay, nice. Paper in English, papel in Spanish. You have fruit and fruta. And then we've got animal and animal. Okay, nice, some nice cognates there. But then once again, the false cognates are friend embarrassed, embarazada. So you're not embarrassed when you say embarazada, you're actually saying that you're pregnant. So just you got to be careful of that. There's lots of other false cognates out there. So just be careful. So that is our fourth, that is the cognate generator. So let's recap today. So what have we talked about? We've talked about 4 different keys, 4 different methods with an accompanying GPT. The first one is our bilingualized approach, where you have a learner definition with a first language translation equivalent. We have morphological word families, where you take a head word and then you add prefixes and suffixes to build that out and expand that. The next we have collocations, so which words pair well together when you're using them in context to sound natural and to really acquire that language. And then the last one is cognates, words that sound similar, often spelled similar, that share a same root across the languages for some low-hanging fruit to really expand your vocabulary. So you'll have access to the ebook. You'll have access to these GPTs. There are also websites listed in this ebook that you can go to that accompany the GPTs. You can test them out to see which ones work best for you. So we will conclude today wanting to thank you for coming. We're very grateful that you're here. There will be a poll that will be coming up. So if you want to go ahead and answer that poll question, if you would like to learn a little bit more about Reading Horizons. If you are watching the recording, here's my email address. Feel free to reach out if you'd like to learn more about Reading Horizons. Maybe you have a question about the ebook or anything we discussed today. Feel free to reach out to me and answer that poll. And with this, I will stick around for 5 or 10 minutes. If anybody has any pressing questions that they want to answer or any ideas, I will stick around at the end of the webinar. But if not, I want to thank you for coming, for being a wonderful audience. Thank you for sharing in this wonderful topic that I love, that's near and dear to my heart. And I wish you as an educator the best, and I wish your students, those learning English, I wish them the best as well, and hope you finish the school year strong. So thank you for coming and have a wonderful Tuesday. Goodbye, everyone.